The throne room of Moonfire Kingdom smelled of blood and burning cedar, a scent that coated my tongue like copper pennies and ash. Torches guttered in iron brackets along walls that had stood for 3 centuries, now cracked and crumbling from the siege. Bodies lay where they had fallen, guards who died protecting a kingdom that could not be saved, nobles who never imagined their privilege could be stripped away in a single night. I knelt among the wreckage, my hands bound with iron chains that burned against my omega skin, my royal blue dress torn and stained with dirt and blood that wasn't mine. Around me, Blackthorn warriors moved with efficient brutality, cataloging treasures, dragging prisoners, extinguishing the last flames of resistance. I kept my gaze fixed on the marble floor beneath my knees, the same floor where I had been presented as heir 22 years ago. The same floor where the council had declared me Omega insufficient, a disgrace to the royal bloodline. My father had wept that day, not from shame, but from fear of what this weakness meant for our kingdom's future. Tonight, his fears had manifested into reality. I was the last living member of the Moonfire royal family, and I was about to become a trophy. The siege had lasted 3 days. 3 days of watching our walls crumble under the relentless assault of the Blackthorn pack. 3 days of hearing screams echo through corridors that had once rung with laughter and music. I had spent those days in the Western Tower with my father, watching him age years in mere hours as report after report came back. The Eastern Gate has fallen. The barracks are overrun. They're in the courtyard. They're at the inner doors. My father had tried to send me away. There was a tunnel beneath the castle, an escape route known only to the royal family. He had begged me to run, to preserve the bloodline, to live so that someday Moonfire might rise again. But I had refused. I was Omega, yes. Weak in the eyes of our people, unable to shift into a wolf powerful enough to defend our borders or lead our armies. But I was still a princess. Still his daughter. I would not abandon him to die alone. So I had stayed. And I had watched him fall. The memory was too fresh, too raw. My father in his ceremonial armor, silver hair flying as he charged toward the Blackthorn Alpha King with a sword that had been carried by 7 generations of Moonfire rulers. The clash of steel. The sickening crunch of bone. His body hitting the marble floor, blood pooling beneath him in a spreading crimson mirror. His last words, whispered as I crawled to him through the chaos, my guards falling around me. Run, Arya. Run and live. Promise me. I had promised. But I had lied. The chains around my wrists grew hotter, pulling me back to the present. Iron burned Omega skin in a way it didn't affect other wolves, a reminder of our place at the bottom of the hierarchy. I could feel blisters forming where the metal touched my flesh, but I didn't cry out. I had learned years ago that showing pain only invited more of it. A boot appeared in my line of vision, black leather polished to a mirror shine despite the carnage. I didn't need to look up to know who it belonged to. The temperature in the room had dropped the moment he entered, the air itself seeming to contract around his presence. Alpha King Caden of the Blackthorn Pack. The Blood King. Conqueror of 7 kingdoms. The wolf who had just made it 8. On your feet, Omega. His voice was deep, rough like gravel scraping against stone. It wasn't a request. I remained kneeling. Not out of defiance, but because my legs had stopped working properly somewhere around the moment my father died. The exhaustion, the grief, the terror, it had all settled into my bones like lead weights. The boot moved closer. Then a hand fisted in my hair, yanking my head back with enough force to make my vision blur. I bit down on my tongue to keep from crying out, tasting blood. I said, on your feet. This time I obeyed, scrambling upward as best I could with my hands bound and my balance compromised by the angle he held me at. My legs shook, but they held. I found myself staring at a chest covered in black armor, blood splattered across the dark metal like abstract art. I forced my gaze upward, past the broad shoulders, past the strong jaw shadowed with dark stubble, until I met eyes that were pure molten gold, the color of honey held up to firelight. Beautiful eyes. Soulless eyes. The eyes of a predator who had never known what it meant to be prey. He was taller than I expected, easily a head and a half above me. His hair was black as a raven's wing, cut short except for a longer section that fell across his forehead. Scars marked his face, thin white lines that spoke of battles survived. He wore violence like other men wore cologne, the scent of it clinging to him beneath the smell of blood and steel. He studied me the way a butcher might study a cut of meat, deciding where best to carve. His hand was still fisted in my hair, holding me in place while his gaze traveled over me with clinical detachment. Taking inventory. Assessing value. This is the princess? He didn't sound impressed. A voice answered from somewhere to my right, elderly and papery thin. Yes, Alpha King. Princess Arya, only child of King Aldrich. Last surviving member of the Moonfire royal bloodline. And she's Omega. It wasn't a question, but the old voice answered anyway. Confirmed, Alpha King. Presented and tested at maturity. Weak wolf form. Insufficient strength for combat or leadership. The council deemed her unsuitable as heir, but tradition demanded she retain the title. Caden's lip curled into something that might have been a smile on a kinder face. On his, it looked like a predator baring its teeth. Unsuitable. That's one word for it. His golden eyes fixed on mine, and I felt my wolf, small and frightened as she was, press herself flat in my mind. Cowering. Tell me, Princess Arya of the fallen Moonfire Kingdom, do you know why you're still alive? I wanted to spit in his face. I wanted to scream at him that he was a murderer, a monster, that he had destroyed everything I loved, and I hoped he rotted in whatever hell awaited wolves like him. But I had learned something in my 22 years of being the disappointment Omega princess. I had learned to survive. And survival sometimes meant swallowing your pride until you could afford to spit it back. No, I whispered. The word came out hoarse, scraped raw by smoke and screaming. Because you're more valuable to me alive than dead. He released my hair finally, but only so he could grab my chin, tilting my face up to catch the torchlight. For now. Footsteps approached, slow and measured. The elderly voice grew closer, and I could see him now from the corner of my eye. An old man in dark robes, hunched with age, his face a map of wrinkles. He carried a staff topped with a crow's skull, and his eyes were milky white with cataracts. Blind, but somehow he moved as if he could see everything. The prophecy is confirmed, Alpha King. The seer, Corvus, stopped beside Caden, his sightless eyes turned toward me as if he could peer into my soul. Royal Omega blood, pure lineage stretching back to the first Moonfire wolves. The moon goddess herself touched this bloodline. Combined with your alpha strength, the result would be unprecedented. Caden's grip on my chin tightened, forcing me to meet his gaze. His thumb pressed against my lower lip, and I tasted blood where my teeth had cut the inside of my mouth earlier. Do you know what a prophecy is, princess? I knew I shouldn't answer. Knew that engaging with him was dangerous. But the question felt like a test, and failing tests had consequences. A prediction I managed. A vision of what might come to pass. Close enough. He released my face, stepping back to gesture broadly at the ruined throne room. Your kingdom fell because it was weak. Your father died because he was weak. You kneel in chains because you are weak. Weakness is a disease, and I have built my empire on cutting out disease before it spreads. But you, he pointed at me with one gloved finger, you have something I need. Something that makes you valuable despite your weakness. Corvus tapped his staff against the marble floor, the sound echoing like a death knell. The prophecy speaks of royal Omega blood joined with Alpha King strength. It speaks of 3 heirs born of this union, each carrying power beyond measure. Triplets who will make their father unstoppable, unkillable, a living god among wolves. My blood turned to ice in my veins. No, that couldn't be what they wanted. What he wanted. Caden smiled then, a real smile this time, and it was worse than any snarl. I want triplets from you, Princess Arya. 3 heirs carrying both your royal bloodline and my alpha strength. 3 weapons that will ensure my empire never falls the way your pathetic kingdom did tonight. The throne room spun. My vision narrowed to a pinpoint, darkness creeping in at the edges. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. He was the man who had murdered my father. Who had slaughtered my people. Who had burned my home to ash. And he wanted me to bear his children. Wanted to use my body as a vessel for his ambition. I don't have a choice, do I? The words came out hollow, empty of everything except resignation. No. He said it simply matter-of-factly, as if he were commenting on the weather. You don't. You can refuse, of course. I'd kill you quickly for that mercy, quicker than I killed your father. But then I'd move on to the survivors I've taken from your kingdom. The women, the children, the elderly who can't defend themselves. I'd make their death slow, painful, creative. And I'd make sure the last thing they knew was that their princess chose her pride over their lives. My hands clenched into fists despite the chains. Monster, I hissed. Realist, he corrected. This is how the world works, princess. The strong take what they want. The weak give it up or die. You're weak. I'm strong. The math is simple. He leaned in close enough that I could feel his breath against my ear. You're more valuable to me pregnant than dead. But only barely. Remember that. He straightened, turning to address someone behind me. Take her to the Luna's chambers. Clean her up. Feed her. Make sure she understands her new purpose. The bonding ceremony will be held within the week. Luna's chambers. He was already calling me Luna, already claiming me as his mate, as if my consent was such a non-issue it didn't even warrant discussion. Guards grabbed my arms, hauling me toward the doors. I didn't resist. What would be the point? My legs moved mechanically, carrying me past the bodies of guards I'd known my whole life. Past the throne where my father had sat in judgment and mercy. Past the great tapestries showing Moonfire's history, now hanging in burning tatters. As they dragged me through the doors, I caught one last glimpse of my kingdom's banner. The silver moon on a field of midnight blue, our symbol for 300 years. It was burning, flames consuming the fabric until nothing remained but ash and smoke. I thought of my father's last words. Run and live. Promise me. I had promised. And I had broken that promise by staying. But maybe, just maybe, I could honor the spirit of it. Live. Survive. Wait for the moment when survival could become something more. Caden wanted triplets from me. He wanted heirs who would make him unstoppable. He thought he'd captured a broken Omega, a weak princess too pathetic to be worth anything beyond breeding. He had no idea what he'd actually captured. He didn't know that Omega wolves had gifts the alphas dismissed as worthless. Empathy. Intuition. The ability to read people, to understand what they wanted and what they feared. He didn't know that I had spent my entire life learning to survive in a world that saw me as lesser. Learning to be underestimated. Learning to wait. He wanted to use me as a vessel for his power. What he didn't understand was that vessels could be weapons too. You just had to wait for the right moment to shatter. The guards shoved me into a room at the end of a long corridor, releasing my arms before slamming the door shut behind me. I heard the lock click into place, sealing me inside. I stood in the darkness, my chains still burning against my skin, my dress still stained with blood and ash. And I made myself a promise to replace the one I'd broken. I would survive this. I would bear whatever needed to be borne. And someday, somehow, I would make Alpha King Caden regret the day he decided I was valuable enough to keep alive. He wanted triplets from a broken Omega. He had no idea what he'd actually captured. I woke to silk against my skin and sunlight streaming through barred windows. For a single, blissful moment, I thought I was home. That the siege had been a nightmare. That my father was alive and well, sitting in the breakfast hall waiting for me to join him for morning tea. Then I tried to move my hands and felt the raw sting where the iron chains had burned my wrists. Memory crashed back like a wave, drowning that brief moment of peace. My father was dead. My kingdom had fallen. And I belonged to the monster who had destroyed everything I loved. The room around me was beautiful in the way a gilded cage is beautiful. All the luxury in the world couldn't disguise the bars. High ceilings painted with murals of wolves running beneath a full moon. Walls covered in tapestries showing hunting scenes and battles won. A massive four-poster bed with curtains of deep crimson velvet. Furniture carved from dark wood and polished until it gleamed. A fireplace large enough to stand in, cold now in the morning light. But the windows, tall and arched and offering a view of mountains in the distance, were crossed with iron bars. The door, heavy oak reinforced with steel, had no handle on the inside. And when I listened carefully, I could hear the steady breathing of guards stationed just beyond it. I had been cleaned while I slept. My ruined dress was gone, replaced by a nightgown of black silk edged with crimson lace. Blackthorn colors. The enemy's colors. Someone had washed the blood and dirt from my skin, combed the tangles from my hair. The chains were gone, but red welts circled my wrists like bracelets of shame. I sat up slowly, testing my body for damage. Bruises darkened my arms where the guards had gripped me. My throat ached from smoke inhalation. My knees were scraped raw from kneeling on marble. But I was whole. Alive. For whatever that was worth. A soft knock at the door made me freeze. The lock clicked, and a young woman entered carrying a tray. She couldn't have been more than 19, with mousy brown hair pulled back in a practical braid and gray eyes that darted nervously around the room before landing on me. She wore the simple dress of a servant, dark fabric with a white apron. "Good morning, my lady." Her voice was barely above a whisper, as if she were afraid of being overheard. "I've brought breakfast." She set the tray on a table near the window, her hands shaking slightly as she arranged the dishes. "There's fresh bread, honey, fruit, and tea. The Alpha King wants you to eat well, to keep your strength up." I didn't move from the bed. "Who are you?" "Vera, my lady." I've been assigned as your handmaiden. She still wouldn't quite meet my eyes, focusing instead on smoothing her apron with nervous fingers. I'm to help you with anything you need. Dressing, bathing, meals. Whatever you require. What I require is to leave this room. Vera's face went pale. I can't, my lady. I don't have authority to unlock the door. Only the guards can do that, and only on the Alpha King's orders. So I'm a prisoner. You're the future Luna, my lady. Vera said it carefully, as if the words themselves might shatter something fragile. The Alpha King has honored you with his choice. You'll want for nothing here. Anything you desire, you need only ask. Accept my freedom. Vera flinched. My lady, please. I could lose my position for speaking plainly, but I'm going to anyway because you seem kind and you deserve to know the truth. You're alive. That's more than most can say after the Blackthorn Pack conquers a kingdom. The Alpha King could have killed you. He could have done far worse than give you a comfortable room and servants to attend you. Whatever he asks of you, whatever role he's chosen for you to play, it's better than the alternative. Please believe that. The alternative being death. Vera nodded, still not meeting my gaze. Or worse. There have been other Omegas, my lady. Captives from other fallen kingdoms. The ones who resisted, who refused to cooperate, they didn't survive. The Alpha King doesn't tolerate defiance. He sees it as weakness pretending to be strength, and he crushes weakness wherever he finds it. I thought of Caden's words in the throne room. You're more valuable to me pregnant than dead. But only barely. The mating ceremony, I said. When? 3 days from now. Vera's voice dropped even lower. They're preparing the ritual chamber. The council will attend. It will be, she paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound like the nightmare it was, formal. Traditional. Traditional. As if there was anything traditional about being forced to bond with the man who murdered my father. As if putting ceremonial dressing on violation somehow made it acceptable. I need to know something, Vera. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my bare feet touching cold stone floor. Has he ever taken a mate before? Is there a Luna already? No, my lady. Vera finally looked at me, and I saw something like pity in her gray eyes. The Alpha King has never chosen a mate. He's always said that bonding was a weakness, that caring for someone gave enemies a target to exploit. You're the first. The only one he's ever wanted for this purpose. This purpose. Not for love. Not for companionship. For breeding. For the prophecy Corvus had spoken of. 3 heirs who would make him unstoppable. The breakfast Vera had brought smelled good despite everything. Fresh bread still warm from the oven, honey that caught the sunlight like liquid gold, berries that looked like they'd been picked that morning. My stomach growled, reminding me that I hadn't eaten since before the siege began. Starvation wouldn't help me survive this. Wouldn't help me figure out how to escape or resist or do anything beyond waste away. I forced myself to eat. The bread was better than anything we'd had in Moonfire, soft and rich. The honey was sweet enough to make my teeth ache. The berries burst with flavor. Even the tea was perfect, hot and fragrant with herbs I couldn't name. Vera watched me eat with visible relief, as if she'd been afraid I would refuse. When I finished, she cleared the tray and set it by the door, then turned back to me with her hands clasped in front of her apron. The Alpha King wishes to speak with you this afternoon, my lady. He'll come here, to your chambers. I'm to help you dress appropriately and make you presentable. Presentable for my captor. How thoughtful. But I didn't argue. What would be the point? I let Vera lead me to a door I hadn't noticed, hidden in the paneling. It opened into a bathing room that was somehow even more luxurious than the bedroom. A large copper tub sat in the center, already filled with steaming water that smelled of lavender and something else, something floral I couldn't identify. Soaps and oils lined shelves carved into the stone walls. Towels thick enough to sleep on hung from hooks. Vera helped me undress, her touch gentle despite the awkwardness of the situation. I caught her staring at the welts on my wrists, her expression tightening with something that might have been anger or might have been guilt. The iron, she said quietly. It burns Omega skin worse than it does others. I'll bring salve later, something to help them heal faster. Why are you being kind to me? The questions seemed to startle her. Because you don't deserve cruelty, my lady. Because you're a prisoner here just like I am, even if your cage is prettier than mine. You're a prisoner too? Vera's laugh was bitter. I was born in a village the Blackthorn Pack conquered 6 years ago. They killed my parents, burned my home, and took the survivors as servants. I've been here ever since, doing whatever I'm told because the alternative is being thrown out to starve or worse. So yes, my lady. I'm a prisoner. Just a different kind than you. I sank into the bath, letting the hot water ease muscles that ached from too much tension and too little rest. Vera washed my hair with careful hands, working out tangles without pulling. For a few minutes, I let myself pretend I was back home with my own servants, preparing for some state dinner or council meeting. That this was normal. That everything was fine. The pretense shattered when Vera pulled out the dress she'd brought for me. Black silk with crimson embroidery along the bodice and sleeves. Beautiful. Expensive. Absolutely nothing I would have chosen for myself. The colors of conquest. The colors of the pack that had destroyed mine. I have to wear that? I'm sorry, my lady. Vera looked genuinely distressed. The Alpha King was specific. He wants you in blackthorn colors. He wants everyone to see that you belong to him now. Belong. Like property. Like one more treasure looted from a fallen kingdom. But I put on the dress because Vera was right. I was alive. That was more than my father, more than the guards who died defending me, more than the nobles who fell in the throne room. I was alive, and as long as I stayed that way, there was a chance. However small, however distant. A chance to escape. To resist. To make Caden regret that he'd kept me breathing. The dress fit perfectly, which meant someone had taken my measurements while I slept. The thought made my skin crawl. Vera laced it up the back, pulling the bodice tight enough to restrict my breathing. She brushed my hair until it shone like a raven's wing, then left it loose down my back. No crown. No jewels. Nothing that marked me as the princess I had been. I was being remade into something else. Someone else. When Vera finished, she stepped back to assess her work. You look beautiful, my lady. Like a true Luna. I look like his possession. A knock at the door, sharp and commanding, cut off whatever Vera might have said in response. She went pale, dropping into a quick curtsy before hurrying to open it. Caden entered like a storm given human form. He seemed even larger in this room than he had in the throne room, his presence filling every corner until there was no space left for anything else. He wore black again, a shirt that showed the breadth of his shoulders and the strength in his arms. No armor this time, but he didn't need it. He was a weapon all on his own. His golden eyes swept over me, taking in the dress, the hair, the way I stood frozen by the window like a bird trying to decide if it could fly through bars. Something that might have been satisfaction flickered across his face. Leave us, he said to Vera without looking at her. She dropped another curtsy and fled, the door closing behind her with a soft click that sounded final as a tomb ceiling. Caden and I stared at each other across the room. I refused to look away first, refused to drop my gaze like a submissive Omega should. Let him see the hate in my eyes. Let him know that putting me in his colors didn't make me his. You're angry, he said. It wasn't a question. You murdered my father. You destroyed my kingdom. You're forcing me into a bond one never agreed to. What exactly should I be feeling? Gratitude. He said it so matter-of-factly that for a moment I thought I'd misheard. You should be grateful I'm giving you purpose. Grateful your death will mean something instead of being just one more casualty of a warrior kingdom was too weak to win. Grateful that I'm offering you a chance to birth something greater than yourself. Greater than myself. As if growing as heirs in my body somehow elevated me instead of reducing me to nothing more than a vessel. I'll give you your heirs, I said. The words tasted like poison. Because you've made it clear I don't have a choice. Because you're holding my people hostage. Because resisting you means watching innocents die. But don't mistake compliance for surrender, Alpha King. Don't mistake my survival instinct for gratitude. And don't ever think that wearing your colors makes me yours. He moved so fast I didn't have time to react. One moment he was across the room. The next his hand was around my throat, not squeezing hard enough to cut off air, but firm enough to make his point. His face was inches from mine, those golden eyes burning with something between rage and amusement. Everything in my kingdom is mine, he said softly. The land. The resources. The people. You. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for both of us. Fight me, and I'll make you watch your precious Moonfire survivors suffer. Every act of defiance will cost them. Every sharp word will buy them pain. Is that what you want, princess? To trade your pride for their blood? My hands came up instinctively, gripping his wrist. Not to pull him away, I wasn't strong enough for that, but to brace myself. To keep from showing how terrified I was. No. No, what? No, Alpha King. The title scraped out of my throat like broken glass. He held me there a moment longer, his thumb pressing against my pulse point where it hammered with fear. Then he released me, stepping back with that same satisfied expression. Better. You're learning. I wanted to claw his eyes out. Wanted to shift into my small, pathetic Omega wolf and tear at his throat even knowing he'd kill me in seconds. But I thought of Vera's words. There have been other Omegas. The ones who resisted didn't survive. I thought of the Moonfire survivors hidden somewhere in this kingdom, waiting for hope that might never come. The ceremony is in 3 days, Caden continued, adjusting his shirt where I'd gripped it. You'll be bathed in ceremonial oils, dressed in traditional bonding robes. The council will witness our union and the mark I place on your neck. After that, you'll be Luna in name and bond. You'll share my chambers, my bed, and you'll give me the heirs the prophecy demands. And if I can't? The question escaped before I could stop it. Omega births are dangerous. What if I'm not strong enough to carry triplets? What if the pregnancy fails? Then you'll have failed your only purpose. His answer was cold, clinical. And I'll have no reason to keep you alive. 3 days later, I stood in a chamber deep beneath the palace, surrounded by wolves who wanted to see me broken. The ritual chamber was ancient, carved from stone and lit by torches that cast dancing shadows across walls covered in symbols I didn't recognize. The air smelled of incense and old magic, cloying enough to make my head swim. I wore robes of white silk, traditional for bonding ceremonies. They were supposed to symbolize purity, new beginnings. On me they felt like a funeral shroud. My hair had been braided with silver thread, my wrists wrapped in ceremonial ribbons that hid the welts from the iron chains. I looked like a bride. I felt like a sacrifice. The Blackthorn Council lined the walls, 12 wolves who served as Caden's advisors. They watched me with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. To them I was a conquered Omega, nothing more. Certainly nothing worthy of standing beside their Alpha King. Corvus stood at the center of the chamber, his blind eyes somehow fixed on me despite his lack of sight. He held a silver blade in his gnarled hands, the metal inscribed with words in a language I didn't know. This was the blade that would cut us both, that would mix our blood in the old way. Blood to blood. Soul to soul. Forever bound. Caden entered last, and the temperature in the room dropped. He wore ceremonial armor, black metal etched with gold that caught the torchlight. His face was carved from stone, showing nothing. No anticipation. No satisfaction. Nothing but cold purpose. He took his place across from me, and Corvus began the ritual words in that ancient language. I didn't understand them, but I felt their weight. Felt the magic in the air responding to each syllable. This wasn't just ceremony. This was binding in the truest sense. Once the mark was placed, once the bond snapped into place, there would be no breaking it. Not without killing one of us. Corvus cut Caden's palm first. Blood welled up, dark against his pale skin. Then he turned to me, the blade gleaming. I didn't flinch when the silver bit into my flesh. Didn't cry out even though it burned worse than the iron chains had. I let my blood drip into the ceremonial bowl where it mixed with Caden's, red swirling into red until they were indistinguishable. The seer spoke words over the bowl, then lifted it to Caden's lips. The Alpha King drank without hesitation, his eyes never leaving mine. When Corvus brought the bowl to me, I wanted to refuse. Wanted to throw it in his face and scream that I would never accept this violation disguised as tradition. But I thought of the survivors. The innocents. The people depending on me to survive this. I drank. The blood tasted like copper and magic and despair. It burned going down, searing a path from throat to stomach to something deeper, something that wasn't physical at all. I felt it settling into my bones, changing something fundamental about who I was. Corvus took the bowl away and gestured for Caden to approach. This was the final step. The mark. The Alpha King would bite my neck, would claim me as his mate in a way that every wolf would be able to see and smell and recognize. The bond would snap into place, tying us together in a way that couldn't be undone. Caden's hand came up to grip the back of my neck, tilting my head to expose the vulnerable line of my throat. His breath was hot against my skin. His teeth, when they extended, were sharp enough to tear through flesh like paper. He bit down. Pain exploded through me, white-hot and all-consuming. I felt my wolf howl inside my mind, a sound of anguish and submission that I hated but couldn't stop. Felt something snap into place between us, a golden thread connecting his soul to mine whether I wanted it or not. The bond settled around me like chains, like prison bars, like everything I feared. When he pulled back, there was blood on his mouth and triumph in his eyes. The council murmured approval. Corvus spoke the final words of the ritual. And I stood there in my white robes with my neck bleeding and my soul bound to the monster who had destroyed everything I loved. That night, in the chambers I would now share with him, Caden took what the ceremony had given him the right to take. I won't describe it. Won't give those moments any more power by turning them into words. I'll only say that I survived it the same way I survived everything else. By leaving my body behind. By retreating into my mind where he couldn't touch the part of me that mattered. By promising myself that survival today meant the chance for revenge tomorrow. When it was over, when he finally left me alone in the massive bed we would share, I lay in the darkness and felt the bond humming between us. A constant reminder of what I'd become. What I'd been forced to accept. But I also felt something else. A warmth low in my abdomen that had nothing to do with what had just happened. A sense of something awakening. Power recognizing power. Destiny beginning to unfold in ways that Caden couldn't predict or control. A soft scratching at the door pulled me from my thoughts. I wrapped myself in a robe and opened it to find Vera, her face pale in the hallway's torchlight. She shouldn't have been there. Servants didn't visit the Alpha King's chambers uninvited. She was risking severe punishment just by standing there. "My lady," she whispered. "I have news. Dangerous news that couldn't wait." I pulled her inside, closing the door quietly behind us. "What is it?" "There are Moonfire survivors. Not the ones the Alpha King captured, but others. Families who escaped during the siege. They're hiding in the southern forests, organizing, waiting for a sign that their princess still lives. Waiting for hope." My heart hammered against my ribs. "How many?" "At least 36 that we know of. Maybe more." Vera's eyes shone with something fierce. "They have warriors, my lady. Not many, but enough. If they knew you were alive, if they knew you were here, they would fight for you. They would die for you." I thought of the bond, fresh and raw around my neck. Thought of Caden's threats about what would happen if I defied him. Thought of all the ways this could go wrong. Then I thought of my father's last words. Run and live. I hadn't run. But I was living. And maybe, just maybe, I could turn this captivity into something else. Something more. "Tell them I'm alive," I said quietly. "Tell them their princess survives. Tell them to be ready. I don't know when. I don't know how. But someday, somehow, I will find a way to reach them. And when I do, we'll take back everything that was stolen from us." Vera nodded, tears streaming down her face. She gripped my hands in hers. "Long live Princess Arya of Moonfire." She slipped out as quietly as she'd come, leaving me alone with the bond one couldn't break and the hope I refused to abandon. Caden thought he'd captured a helpless Omega. Thought he'd bound me to him in a way that made me powerless. He'd actually brought a spy into his palace. A weapon aimed at his heart, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. 6 weeks had passed since the bonding ceremony. 6 weeks of existing in a strange limbo between captive and Luna, between powerless and positioned. The palace had settled into a new rhythm around me, one where I was simultaneously revered and watched, honored and imprisoned. The morning I discovered I was pregnant, I was in the gardens trying to pretend I was anywhere else. The gardens were the only place I was allowed without guards shadowing my every step, probably because they were enclosed by walls too high to climb and gates that stayed locked. Still, it was better than being trapped in chambers that smelled like Caden and conquest. The nausea hit me suddenly, violent enough that I barely made it to the rose bushes before emptying my stomach. When the heaving stopped, I sat back on my heels, wiping my mouth with shaking hands. I knew what it meant. Had known for days, really, as my body changed in small ways that were impossible to ignore. The tenderness in my breasts. The exhaustion that no amount of sleep could cure. The way certain smells made my stomach turn. The prophecy was beginning. I was carrying Caden's child. Or children. Head healer Mara confirmed it that afternoon, her ancient hands gentle as they pressed against my abdomen, calling on magic older than the palace itself. The glow that emanated from beneath her palms was soft gold, warm, unmistakable. When she opened her eyes, they shone with something between reverence and fear. "You're with child, my lady." The words fell into the silence like stones into still water. "Congratulations. The prophecy begins its fulfillment." She sent word to Caden immediately. I sat in the healing chambers, my hands folded in my lap, my mind racing. This was what he wanted. What he'd forced me into bonding for. I should have felt nothing but resentment, anger at being reduced to a vessel for his ambitions. Instead, beneath all that, I felt something else. A fierce protectiveness for the life growing inside me. This child hadn't asked to be conceived in violence and ambition. Hadn't chosen to be part of a prophecy or a power play. Whatever else was true, this child was innocent. And I would protect that innocence with everything I had. Caden arrived within the hour, striding into the healing chambers with Corvus trailing behind him. His golden eyes found mine, and for just a moment, something flickered across his face. Not warmth exactly, but something less cold than usual. "It's confirmed?" he asked Mara, though his gaze never left me. "Yes, Alpha King. She's approximately 6 weeks along. Still very early, but the life force is strong. I can already feel the power within." "How many?" The question came from Corvus, his blind eyes turned toward my belly as if he could see through flesh to what lay beneath. "Does the prophecy hold true? Are there 3? Mara's brow furrowed. "It's too early to tell for certain, but I'll monitor closely. We should know more in another 6 weeks or so when the heartbeats become distinguishable." Caden nodded, then did something that surprised me. He crossed the room and placed his hand over my abdomen, palm flat against the silk of my dress. The bond between us hummed to life at his touch, that golden thread pulling taut. I felt his satisfaction through it, his cold pleasure at having secured what he wanted. "You'll have the best care," he said. It wasn't affection in his voice, but it wasn't entirely empty either. "Whatever you need to ensure the prophecy is fulfilled, you'll have it. The best healers. The finest foods. Complete protection." "How generous," I said quietly. "To care so much for your heirs." His jaw tightened. "Don't mistake practicality for sentiment, Arya. You're valuable while you're carrying my children. After they're born, your value decreases significantly. Remember that." He left, taking Corvus with him, and I was alone with Mara again. She busied herself mixing tonics and supplements, her movements efficient despite her age. "He's not entirely wrong, you know," she said without looking at me. "Omega pregnancies are dangerous, especially multiples. The mortality rate is higher than anyone likes to admit. Your body wasn't built for this kind of strain." She finally met my eyes, and I saw genuine concern there. "I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe, my lady. But you should know the risks. If I die, what happens to the children? If you die before they're viable, they die with you. If you die during birth, I'll do everything I can to save them," but she trailed off. "The odds aren't good. So Caden's prophecy requires me to survive at least until the children are born." "Something like that, yes." It was the first real leverage I'd had since arriving in this palace. Not much. Not enough. But something. The weeks that followed were suffocating in their attentiveness. Caden installed guards outside my chambers who watched my every movement. Mara visited twice daily to check on the pregnancy's progress, performing her magical scans and recording every detail. My diet was controlled down to the smallest meal, every bite calculated to ensure optimal nutrition for the growing lives inside me. I wasn't allowed to climb stairs without assistance. Wasn't allowed to lift anything heavier than a book. Wasn't allowed to do anything that might risk the prophecy's fulfillment. I was simultaneously more valuable and more trapped than I'd ever been. Corvus visited frequently, performing rituals over my belly that made my skin crawl. He would chant in that ancient language, his gnarled hands hovering just above my abdomen, calling on powers I didn't understand to ensure 3 strong heirs. 3 weapons for his Alpha King. 3 children who would make Caden unstoppable. Caden himself was a constant, cold presence. He would come to our shared chambers each night, would place his hand on my growing belly and feel for movement that was still too early to detect. But he never touched me with affection. Never asked how I felt beyond whether the pregnancy was progressing well. I was an incubator. A means to an end. Nothing more. At 12 weeks, Mara performed the scan that would reveal how many children I carried. Caden insisted on being present, as did Corvus. They stood on either side of the bed where I lay, their attention fixed on my abdomen as Mara placed her hands and called her magic. The golden glow appeared again, brighter this time. Stronger. Mara's face went from focus to confused to something that looked like shock. Her hands moved across my belly, pressing here and there as if searching for something she couldn't find. "What is it?" Caden's voice was sharp. "How many?" Mara's hands stilled. There's only 1 heartbeat, Alpha King." The temperature in the room plummeted. 1? Yes. Strong, very strong, but singular. There's only 1 child. Impossible. Corvus stepped forward, his staff tapping against the floor. "The prophecy speaks of 3. There must be 3. Check again." "I've checked 3 times now." Mara's voice held steady despite the fear I could see in her eyes. "I can only detect 1 heartbeat. 1 life force." The relief that flooded through me was so intense it nearly made me sob. 1 child instead of 3. One life to protect instead of multiple. One pregnancy that might actually be survivable instead of the near-certain death sentence that triplets would have been. But then I saw Caden's face. Saw the rage building behind his carefully controlled expression. Saw the way his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Leave us," he said to Mara and Corvus. Both of them. "Alpha King," Corvus began, but Caden cut him off with a snarl that made everyone in the room flinch, even me. I said leave. They fled, the door closing behind them with a soft click. And then I was alone with Caden and his fury. He moved so fast I didn't have time to protect myself. His hand closed around my throat, not squeezing yet, but the threat was clear. "You did this." "I couldn't have," I gasped, my hands coming up to grip his wrist. "I don't know how. I don't have that kind of power. You're Omega. You're weak. And somehow you've managed to kill 2 of my heirs before they even had a chance to form." His grip tightened just enough to make breathing difficult. "Did you use dark magic? Make some bargain I don't know about? Or are you just so pathetic that your body can't even manage to carry what I put in it?" "I didn't do anything." Tears streamed down my face, whether from lack of air or fear or rage I couldn't tell. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to be your broodmare or your prisoner or anything else. If there's only one child, that's not my fault." "Everything is your fault," he snarled. "You're the weak link. The flaw in the prophecy. I should have known better than to trust an Omega to give me what I need." He released me suddenly, and I collapsed back against the pillows, gasping for air. He paced the room like a caged predator, his control hanging by a thread. "One heir," he muttered. "One child when I was promised 3. How is that supposed to make me unstoppable? How is that supposed to fulfill anything? Maybe the prophecy was wrong, I managed. Maybe Corvus misinterpreted it. Maybe there never were supposed to be triplets at all. Corvus doesn't make mistakes." Caden stopped pacing to pin me with those golden eyes. "Which means you did something. Sabotage. Dark magic. Something to ruin what was meant to be. And I will find out what." He turned toward the door, then stopped with his hand on the handle. "If this single child isn't powerful enough to fulfill the prophecy, I'll kill it the moment it's born. And then I'll kill you. Do you understand me? You have one chance to give me what I need. One. Don't waste it on being weak." Then he was gone, the door slamming behind him hard enough to rattle the windows. I lay there in the silence that followed, my hands pressed protectively over my belly. One child. My mind kept circling back to it. Only 1 instead of 3. The relief and the terror balanced on a knife's edge. Relief that I might actually survive this pregnancy. Terror about what Caden would do when the child was born and failed to meet his impossible expectations. The baby moved for the first time then, just a flutter so faint I almost missed it. Like butterfly wings against the inside of my womb. My breath caught. This was real. This was life. My child, whatever else might be true. "I will protect you," I whispered to my belly, to the tiny life growing there. "I don't care what he says or what he wants. I will protect you with everything I have." That night, alone in the massive bed I'd been forced to share with Caden, I felt the bond between us, but also something else. A presence that wasn't his. A warmth that settled in my abdomen like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. My wolf, silent since the bonding ceremony, suddenly surged forward with protective fury so intense it took my breath away. And then I heard it. Not a voice exactly, more like a feeling given words. Like ancestral memory whispering truths I was meant to understand. One who carries the power of 3. My hands pressed harder against my belly. What did that mean? How could one child carry the power meant for 3? But even as I asked the question, I knew the answer. Felt it in the way my wolf settled protectively around the life in my womb. Felt it in the strange magic that had been growing stronger with each passing week. Felt it in the certainty that bloomed in my chest despite all logic. This wasn't failure. This wasn't sabotage or weakness. This was something else entirely. Something Caden and Corvus didn't understand because they'd been so focused on the number 3 that they'd missed the real meaning of the prophecy. Not 3 heirs sharing power. 1 heir carrying it all. The next morning, Vera came to help me dress. She moved around the room with her usual efficiency, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes kept darting to my neck where faint bruises from Caden's hand were still visible. "Is it true, my lady?" She whispered it so quietly I almost didn't hear. "About the baby? That there's only 1? "It's true." Vera's hands stilled on the laces of my dress. "The Alpha King, is he very angry?" "Furious." I met her eyes in the mirror. "He thinks I sabotaged the pregnancy somehow. That I killed 2 of the children before they could form." "Did you?" No. I turned to face her directly. Vera, I need you to promise me something. If anything happens to me, if I don't survive this pregnancy or if Caden kills me after the child is born, I need you to protect my baby. Get them away from here. Take them to the Moonfire survivors in the southern forests. Can you do that? Vera's eyes filled with tears. Nothing is going to happen to you, my lady. You're going to survive this. You're going to raise your child and see your kingdom restored, and everything is going to be all right. Promise me anyway. Please. She nodded, wiping at her eyes. I promise. On my life, I promise. Over the weeks that followed, I began training in secret. Nothing obvious. Nothing that would alert the guards or healers. But I would walk the gardens for hours, building strength and endurance. I would practice the breathing techniques my mother had taught me for controlling panic. I would gather information from Vera about the palace's layout, the guard schedules, the places where security was weakest. I didn't know what I was preparing for exactly. Didn't know if I was planning an escape or a rebellion or simply trying to ensure I survived long enough to see my child born. But I knew I couldn't be passive anymore. Couldn't just wait for Caden to decide my fate. I was carrying a child who was innocent of all the violence and ambition that had created them. And I would be strong enough to protect that innocence, no matter what it cost me. Caden wanted triplets to make him unstoppable. He'd gotten one child instead, and he saw it as failure. As weakness. As proof that I was as worthless as he'd always believed Omegas to be. But I felt that warmth in my abdomen growing stronger every day. Felt my wolf's protective fury building like a storm. Felt the certainty settling into my bones that this child, this single child, was going to be more than any prophecy could have predicted. He wanted 3 weapons. Instead, he was creating the one thing that could destroy him. He just didn't know it yet. Labor began at 8 months, 6 weeks earlier than expected. I woke in the deepest part of night to pain radiating through my lower back, sharp enough to steal my breath. At first, I thought it was nothing, just the discomfort that had become normal in the late stages of pregnancy. But then the pain wrapped around to my abdomen, tightening like a fist, and I knew. The baby was coming. Now. Too soon. But coming regardless. I managed to reach the bell pull by the bed, yanking it hard enough that the cord nearly came free from the wall. Within moments, guards burst through the door, followed quickly by Mara and 2 younger healers I'd seen, but never spoken to directly. Labor, Mara confirmed after a quick examination, her weathered face set in grim lines. Early, but the baby's position is good. Strong heartbeat. This is happening whether we're ready or not. Someone fetch the Alpha King, one of the guards said, and my heart sank. Of course they would summon him. He'd want to be here for the birth of his heir. Would want to see immediately whether this single child could possibly fulfill the prophecy he'd built his hopes on. No, I gasped between contractions. Don't, he doesn't need to be here. He doesn't want to be here. But the guard was already gone, and Mara was helping me out of bed, supporting me as another wave of pain crashed through my body. We need to get you to the birthing chamber, my lady. Can you walk? I nodded, though walking felt impossible. The birthing chamber was 3 doors down from the bedroom I shared with Caden, a room I'd been shown weeks ago as part of the preparations. It was smaller than I expected, more intimate, with a bed designed for labor and tables lined with supplies and instruments. Mara and her assistants helped me onto the bed, stripping away my nightgown and replacing it with a thin shift that would be easier to work with. The contractions came faster, harder. Pain that made my previous suffering feel like nothing. I'd thought I understood agony after the bonding ceremony, after months of captivity. But this was different. This was my body tearing itself apart to bring new life into the world. Hours blurred together. Dawn light began creeping through the window. Mara checked my progress regularly, her face growing more concerned with each examination. The labor was advancing quickly, too quickly for a first pregnancy. The baby was coming whether my body was ready or not. Caden never came. At some point, through the haze of pain, I heard one of the guards report that the Alpha King had declined to attend the birth. That he would see the child after it was cleaned and evaluated. After he knew whether it was worth his time. The rejection should have hurt. Should have made me feel even more alone. Instead, it was almost a relief. I didn't want him here. Didn't want his cold presence watching as I fought for my life and my child's. This moment was mine. Mine and my baby's. He'd already taken so much. I wouldn't let him take this too. Push, my lady, Mara commanded. I could feel her magic supporting me, easing the pain where she could, strengthening my body where it needed reinforcement. One more push, and the head will crown. I bore down with everything I had, screaming through clenched teeth as pain beyond description ripped through me. And then, suddenly, pressure released. A rush of sensation that was almost relief except for the exhaustion that crashed over me immediately after. "The head is out," Mara announced. "One more push, my lady. One more, and you'll meet your daughter." Daughter. The word pierced through the fog of pain and exhaustion. I was having a girl. A princess. An heir to Moonfire Kingdom, even if that kingdom existed now only in memory and hope. I pushed again, pouring every last reserve of strength into it. Felt my body give way. Felt the baby slip free into Mara's waiting hands. And then silence. Perfect, terrifying silence. I struggled to sit up, panic flooding through me. Why wasn't she crying? Was she alive? Had I come this far only to lose her in the final moment? Then my daughter took her first breath and screamed. The sound shattered every window in the birthing chamber. The torches flared so bright they nearly went out. And every wolf in the palace, guards and servants and council members alike, felt the dominance in that cry and dropped to their knees involuntarily. It wasn't a baby's cry. It was a command. A declaration. A challenge to every alpha who'd ever lived that they'd just met their superior. Mara staggered back, her eyes wide with shock. The two younger healers had fallen to their knees, heads bowed. Even the guards outside the door, I could hear them collapse against the wall. Only I seemed unaffected, though perhaps that was because I'd carried this power inside me for 8 months. Had felt it growing, building, becoming something no one had anticipated. Mara recovered first, her healer's instincts overriding her shock. She wrapped my daughter in clean linen and brought her to me, placing the tiny, screaming bundle on my chest. The moment my skin touched hers, the crying stopped. The power that had filled the room settled, becoming almost gentle. "She's perfect," Mara whispered, and there was awe in her voice. Absolutely perfect. I looked down at my daughter and felt my heart crack open in ways I didn't know were possible. She had my hair, black as midnight, already thick for a newborn. But her eyes, when they opened to look at me, were her father's golden color. Except they glowed. Not with the warm gold of Caden's eyes, but with silver light that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. "Luna," I whispered. "Your name is Luna. For the moon goddess. For the kingdom that should have been yours." The door to the birthing chamber slammed open. Caden stood in the doorway, his face carved from stone. He'd felt it. Every wolf in the palace had felt it. That surge of power that announced something unprecedented had just entered the world. "Where is it?" His voice was harsh. "Let me see this failure of a prophecy." I clutched Luna tighter to my chest, my exhausted body still managing to find one last reserve of protective fury. "She's not in it. She's your daughter. And she's not a failure." Caden crossed the room in 3 long strides. He reached for Luna, clearly intending to take her from my arms. To examine her. To judge whether she was worth keeping alive. The moment his hand touched her, Luna's eyes snapped open and she screamed again. This time, the power didn't just fill the room. It exploded outward like a shockwave. Caden was thrown backward, slammed against the wall hard enough to crack the stone. An invisible force pinned him there, holding him suspended a foot off the ground. His eyes went wide with shock and something that might have been fear. Every wolf in the palace felt it. Not just the dominance, but the absolute authority behind it. This was power that didn't ask for submission. It demanded it. Commanded it on a level so fundamental that even an alpha king had no choice but to obey. Mara had fallen to her knees again, her head bowed so low her forehead touched the floor. The other healers were prostrate. The guards outside were whimpering. And Luna, my tiny newborn daughter, who couldn't possibly understand what she was doing, continued to scream with power that made the very air vibrate. I pulled her back against my chest, pressing my lips to her downy hair. "Shut, little one. You're safe. I've got you. Nothing is going to hurt you." The power settled immediately. Luna's cries faded to soft whimpers, then to silence. Caden dropped to the floor, gasping for breath. The force that had pinned him released, leaving him staggering but upright. Footsteps pounded down the corridor. Corvus burst into the room, ancient texts clutched in his gnarled hands. He stopped when he saw the scene before him, me in the birthing bed, exhausted and bloody but holding my daughter. Caden against the wall, looking shaken in a way I'd never seen. Mara and the others still on their knees. "The prophecy," Corvus breathed. "I misread it. I misunderstood." "What are you talking about?" Caden's voice was rough, still recovering from having the breath knocked out of him. Corvus moved closer to the bed, his blind eyes somehow fixed on Luna. The prophecy spoke of 3 heirs, yes, but not 3 separate children. He gestured to Luna with one shaking hand. 1 heir carrying the power of 3. Royal Omega blood so pure it concentrates power instead of diluting it. Combined with Alpha King strength. The result isn't 3 children sharing power. It's 1 child carrying what was meant for 3. Exponentially stronger. Absolutely unprecedented. Caden pushed away from the wall, his shock giving way to something else. Something calculating. So she's powerful. More powerful than expected. That's good. That's what I wanted. He started to approach the bed again, reaching for Luna. I shifted her away from him, my body screaming in protest, but my will absolute. Don't touch her. She's my heir. My weapon. I'll do what I want with her. Luna's eyes opened at the sound of his voice. The silver light began to pulse again, power building like a storm about to break. Corvus stepped between Caden and the bed, moving faster than I would have thought possible for someone his age. Alpha King, you need to understand. This child's power isn't like anything we've encountered before. It's instinctive, protective, and right now, it's bonded to her mother. Luna will only accept Aria's touch, Aria's voice. Anyone else who tries to take her or harm her will face the full force of what she is. Caden stared at Corvus, then at me, then at the tiny baby in my arms who'd just thrown an Alpha King across a room without even trying. I watched understanding dawn on his face. Understanding and the first real fear I'd ever seen him show. You're saying I can't control her. I'm saying she won't bow to you. Won't obey you. She'll only respond to her mother. Which means, Corvus turned his sightless gaze toward me, the Omega you've brutalized and imprisoned is now the most powerful person in this palace. Because she's the only one who can command the ultimate weapon you wanted so desperately. The silence that followed was absolute. I looked at Caden and saw him seeing me, really seeing me, for the first time since he'd dragged me into his kingdom in chains. Saw him realizing that every cruelty he'd inflicted, every threat he'd made, every way he'd reduced me to nothing more than a vessel, had just come back to destroy him. Because I wasn't helpless anymore. I was the mother of the most powerful wolf in existence. The only person that power would obey. Which made me untouchable. I pulled myself up straighter despite the exhaustion, despite the pain, despite everything my body had just been through. When I spoke, my voice was steady and cold and absolutely certain. You wanted power, Caden. You wanted heirs who would make you unstoppable. You have 1 heir more powerful than you ever imagined. But she's mine. She answers to me. She obeys me. She'll protect me with everything she is because that's what this power does. It protects what matters most. I paused, making sure he understood every word. So here's the new arrangement. You want access to this power? You want your weapon? You deal with me. Not as your captive. Not as your breeding Omega. Not as something you can threaten or control or discard when it's no longer useful. You deal with me as Luna's mother. As the queen mother of whatever empire you think you're building. Do you understand? Caden's jaw clenched. His hands fisted at his sides. I could see him running calculations, trying to find a way out of the trap I'd just sprung. But there wasn't one. He couldn't kill me without losing access to Luna's power. Couldn't control Luna without going through me. Couldn't do anything except that the Omega he'd brutalized now held all the leverage. Fine, he ground out. You'll have whatever protection you need. Whatever status you require. But that child is still mine. My heir. My legacy. She's ours, I corrected. Your blood and mine. Your strength and my bloodline. And she'll be raised knowing both sides of her heritage. The Blackthorn power and the Moonfire compassion. You don't get to mold her into nothing but a weapon. We'll see about that. No, I said firmly. We won't. Because if you try, if you attempt to use her or manipulate her or turn her into something twisted, she'll feel my distress and her power will respond. And I don't think even you want to face what she becomes when she thinks her mother is threatened. Luna yawned in my arms, a tiny sound that should have been harmless. But the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees, and frost formed on the windows. Point made. Caden stared at us for a long moment. Mother and daughter. Omega and unprecedented power. The prisoners who'd just become the most valuable pieces on his board. Then he turned and stalked out of the birthing chamber, his footsteps echoing down the corridor like thunder. Corvus remained, his expression unreadable. You've just changed everything, he said quietly. The entire balance of power in this kingdom shifted the moment that child was born. I know. I looked down at Luna, at her perfect tiny features and her glowing silver gold eyes. And I'm terrified. But I'm also done being helpless. Done being powerless. My daughter will never know what it means to be seen as lesser because of what she is. She'll be raised knowing her worth. And maybe, just maybe, she'll grow up to build something better than what her father has created. Your Moonfire survivors, Corvus said. The ones hiding in the southern forests. They should know their princess has given them more than just hope. She's given them a future. I looked up sharply. You know about them? I know many things, child. Including that the prophecy isn't finished yet. This is just the beginning. His mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. The Alpha King wanted triplets to make him a god. Instead, he's given an Omega the only weapon that could checkmate a king. Poetic, in its way. He left then, taking Mara and the other healers with him. The door closed, leaving me alone with my daughter in the aftermath of everything that had just changed. I held Luna close, feeling her breathe against my chest. Feeling the immense power that lived in this tiny body, waiting to grow, waiting to become whatever she was meant to be. She'd wanted triplets from a broken Omega. He thought he'd force me to give him the ultimate weapons. Instead, I'd given him something far more dangerous. A daughter who could never be controlled. A child whose power would always protect her mother. An heir who would grow up knowing that strength came in many forms, and that being Omega didn't mean being weak. It meant being underestimated. Right up until the moment you proved everyone wrong. I kissed Luna's forehead, tasting salt from my own tears. Welcome to the world, little one. Your kingdom is broken. Your father is a monster. Your mother is an Omega who is supposed to be worthless. But you're something no one expected. Something no prophecy could truly predict. Your hope-given form. And together, we're going to change everything. Outside the window, the sun rose over the Blackthorn Palace. A new day. A new beginning. The start of something that Caden would spend the rest of his life trying to control and failing. Because he'd wanted power. And power, as it turned out, had chosen me.